Hi, I'm Dr. Lenne Hunt with the Marriage Recovery Center, and we're talking today about concerns that parents often have when they're struggling with their marriages but wonder about what's best for the kids. I hear that question a lot these days. I think that being home with COVID has probably even increased the urgency of that question. So I do want to address two of the most common questions I hear by way of people's concerns about their kids and how to help them in the midst of prolonged, intense marital conflict. Obviously, the answer to the questions I'm about to discuss depend in part on the ages of the kids. Certainly, really young kids lack the capacity to think through the issues sufficiently, and also they lack the capacity for emotional regulation, and so they're going to struggle more with information and might need less of it consequently, whereas older children are much more aware than parents think they are about what might be going on in the home. So let me start with what to tell kids. From my perspective, the primary issue there has to do with validating their perceptions that all may not be well, while still providing them a base of security from which to operate. What you don't want to do, when kids come to you and ask, Mommy, are you and Dad okay? Or, when they've witnessed a fight, an argument, especially if it's been intense, loud, really, especially if it's been physical, when they come to you and ask some version of what happened, are you okay? That kind of thing. What you don't want to do is to deny that there's something wrong, because that in effect performs some gaslighting for the children. Basically, you've said that their version of reality, their perception of reality is way off, and you don't want to do that to them. So you do want to validate that, yes, Mom and Dad are having difficulty, yes. We're having lots of fights these days. We're having lots of conflict these days. And there's some degree of normalization you want to do for that. In other words, conflict is inevitable in relationships. So it's not that you want to say, there should never be any of that. But you also don't want to normalize the bad kinds of conflict, where there's name calling and things get thrown and people are ugly to one another. So really, depending on what's going on in your home, you do want to acknowledge that something is wrong. Again, how specific you get about that depends in part on the age and the maturity of the child. There's some things that will never be theirs to know. They're private things that aren't helpful to them. And that's really the guide for what to tell them, what would be helpful to them. Not even what would be helpful to you, but what would be helpful to them to know. So you want to provide some validation for their perception, while also saying, that doesn't change that Mommy loves you. That doesn't change, that I'll always be there for you. That doesn't change. And then you want to kind of be specific about what doesn't change, even though the marriage might be in flux. Kids need to know that there's a stable base, even if you don't feel like one right now. And I know that that's the hard part. When marriages are going sideways, you may not feel like a stable base, but you have to be one for them. And so you're going to have to just kind of set that aside for the purpose of the discussion, and offer them some comfort from which to operate. That leads me to the second question, which is what's best for kids with regard to separations in marriage. And let me say from the outset that separations happen in a lot of different flavors and stripes. Sometimes couples separate just by way of a timeout, just need a break from one another. Sometimes separations are a way for the two parties to figure out whether or not they're going to press on together or not. And sometimes separations happen when there's already been a conclusion made that the marriage is ending, and now this is kind of the preparation stage for that. Also, separations vary quite a bit in how people do that. So I've worked with couples who separate and have no contact whatsoever with one another, or perhaps only by email, where I've worked with other families where there's a separation and they still talk every day, might even see each other a couple of days a week. So again, it really depends on what your separation might look like. But with respect to how that affects children, here are the best answers I can give you. Does it matter that kids might not have access in their lives to both parents on a full-time, everyday basis? Yes, it does. And there's no way around that. I think every mom's fear is, is it going to hurt my child to grow up without a dad there in the home? Yes, it probably will. Does that leave a hole? Yes, it does. I'm not going to lie to you about that. And there's a however. And the however is that staying in a bad marriage is also harmful to children. And so you're looking here at a weighing out of that. The downside to staying together in high conflict is that children begin to develop ideas of what's normal in relationships. Do you want them to believe that what's going on in yours is normal, is to be expected in their own relationships as they grow up? Is the model you're exposing them to of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, is that the takeaway that you want them to have in this? You absolutely don't want to endanger children, especially physically. That's true. So if there's any sort of physical violence going on in your home, even if it's directed only at you and not at the kids, that's still not okay, because they may at some point try to step into the middle of that. You don't want that to happen. But even if what's going on is not physically abusive, but is emotionally so, that's not a place that's good for children. I hear story after story after story of children who are heartbroken, angry, hurt, confused by how they see one parent treat another. They worry about their moms when they see her run over and her heart mistreated. They really, really struggle with that. So, will there be consequences for separation, for possible divorce? Yes. Yes, there will be. But there are equally heavy consequences for staying in a damaging environment. Can separations be done well? Can potential divorces be done well so that minimal harm comes to kids? Yes. If the two partners are cooperative, if they can put the needs of the children above what's going on in the marriage, then yes, there are ways to do this well. There are ways to minimize harm. And I know that that's a complicated subject. We're really just treating it at the surface here in this video. But there are ways to handle this. I realize that many of you have lengthier discussions that you might want to have with me about it. I'd be more than happy to do that. I don't for a moment want to pretend that these are easy questions or easy scenarios to work through. They aren't. They're weighty. They feel weighty to you. They're consequential to your kids, and I really want to honor that that's true. But I would be more than happy to talk with you about that. There are many options at the Marriage Recovery Center for how to handle what's going on in your life right now. One of them is the Path to Renewal, which is an online marriage counseling course that you do with other couples. Has huge benefits to marriages. So if you've not looked at that before, I want you to consider that. But if that's not your thing, we certainly do one-on-one video coaching and therapy. I'd be more than happy to join you in that. you'll see a number appear at the bottom of the screen. That's to our client care team, a wonderful, sensitive group of folks who can give you any information you need about our services and help get you hooked up to that. So please, I want to say, if this is on your mind, if you've got questions about your children, about your family, please give our client care team a call. It's worth a conversation, and I would love to do that with you. Thanks for joining today.